So hello and welcome to the Salt
All
Fireside
right.
Chat. We're excited to be supporting Bitcoin Magazine's 21-hour celebration of this third Momentous event, and looking forward to many more of these. I'm Rob, and I'll be discussing all things Bitcoin, Bitcoin lending with our Chief Technology Officer, Dirk Anderson, who is also the committee chair and certified Bitcoin professional testing committee, and a regular instructor on topics around cryptocurrencies. And this man absolutely loves talking about cryptography.
It's true, I do. Not that I'm any good at it, but I do love it. And I'll be asking questions of Rob Odell, Chief Product Officer at Salt, also a regular presenter and early adopter, who's been telling anyone who will listen to him about Bitcoin since he first wrote the animated short called Bitcoins for Your Grandma back in 2013.
Oh, it's so embarrassing to pluralize Bitcoins. If I could go back and change history. Yeah, so let's get started. Dirk, I think it'd be interesting for people to know how you got started in crypto and how you ended up working at Salt.
Right. Well, so as you mentioned, I'm the CTO. So I'm responsible for information technology, our custody department, and our software development. But I actually come from about 25 years of experience in information security and compliance background. So IT risk management, that sort of thing. Originally came out of IT in telecom way back in the day. And then I spent about the last 15 years building a startup that is now the largest independent IT compliance company in the country. And I have to admit, and hopefully I won't get too much flack for this, but I am one of those people who's responsible for some of the lost Bitcoin back in 2011-ish, I guess. Some friends and I built a mining rig and did some mining, and this was right after the like $30 bubble, and after it had gone back down to being a few dollars Bitcoin. And we did that for a little while, and we were like, well, that was cool. Now what do we want to do with these boxes? And I think we built a cluster. But so anyways, I take full responsibility for some of the Bitcoin that's floating around out there and accessible. But then, like I said, I got really into the information security side of things, and did that for a while. And then just a couple of years ago, I got a call from an old friend of mine, old coworker of mine, who was the CIO at the time at Salt, asked me to come and help build a compliance program. So I did that. And while I had been really into the technology around Bitcoin previously, again, because I was a crypto geek, how it actually worked, it wasn't until then that I really started to kind of understand some of the social potential from watching videos, Andreas's videos, listening to Caleb Slade, who was one of the founders of Salt. And it became kind of a whole new world for me at that point. And I was really, hook, line, and sinker. And Salt was kind of the perfect place to, for me at that point to explore that, because it kind of sits in that transitional place between, the historical and traditional world of finance and crypto. So that's kind of how I got here. What about you, Rob? How did you get drawn into the crypto mania?
Oh, it's not dissimilar to you. I think one of the cool things about the space, and maybe it gives us some scars, but those scars remind us about what Bitcoin means to us. But having lost it, having had those stories, I'm really not much different in that regard. I had the fortunate circumstance to be able to start a company with a friend and work fully remote. And at the time, I was living in Bali, Indonesia, with my wife, who wanted to be a scuba dive instructor, and that was a lifelong dream for her. So while she was doing that, I was inside in one of the most beautiful places in the world working. But occasionally we'd go to meetups with some expats and entrepreneurs, and we would always bond over coffee in the afternoon. And there was one guy there in particular who was selling he was roasting local beans and selling them on the internet. And obviously my first thought was, well, if you're selling these internationally, and you're living in Bali, how do you make that transaction? How do you, do the currency conversion, that type of thing? And that's when, that was my first introduction to Bitcoin, and he was accepting payment only in Bitcoin. And this was probably early 2013, I believe, if I remember correctly. So, that was my first sort of interaction with it. But at the time I didn't I didn't think like, oh, let me go buy it. Let me be a,
Right.
let me participate. Or maybe I did and forgot about it, and I can't recall exactly what happened between. There's like we'll call it a blackout period.
Well, it wasn't easy to
So
buy back then, right? So
exactly. I think Coinbase had barely gotten started. So, at that point, I was talking to anybody that would listen about Bitcoin, but it kind of had fallen by the wayside. And I took a job working as a product consultant for a company where I was embedded in other companies as their main product strategist, working on delivering products. And one of the things that I didn't really love about that at the time was, or eventually didn't love about it, was that we would deliver products to other companies where we would turn the code base over. And so it would take us, 6 months or a year, depending on the length of the project, but I never really got to iterate on a product. I never really got to get that feedback from customers and really continuously iterate and improve a product. So, luckily around mid 2017, I had a friend that was doing some work with Salt and also Shapeshift, and she said that I might be a good match for Salt, and they were just getting started. They're just building their first version of their product. And so I interviewed, and it was quite the process, and was able to join in October of 2017, and really have thoroughly enjoyed, the ride since then, and being involved and watching the product grow and iterating on it, and being able to participate with customers and build their feedback into the product and experience.
yeah, no, I totally get what you mean with the building things there, right? After 15 years in IT security and audit, you can only tell people year after year that they suck so many times before it just becomes depressing, right? You want to,
Yes.
I wanted to like get back into the side of building things and see if I could actually try to do something right, or at least close to it, and something fun. So totally get that. What was it about Salt that actually interested you specifically? What made you want to work there after the ordeal of interviewing?
Yeah, I mean, so when I interviewed, I think there's maybe 8 or 10 people that had, and most of them were co-founders. So you really get that firsthand story of why they started the company. And there's, the story was, they tried to start a different type of business. They met at a libertarian meetup group, and had interacted with each other on a couple of different occasions, and had all come up with the idea that they wanted to start a business, again, the separate business, but they wanted to use the Bitcoin that they had as leverage to be able to start that business. But, taking the long view, they didn't want to sell it. They were looking, so they started going to banks, they started going to alternative lenders and looking for opportunities to be able to say, we want to hold on to this asset. Can you guys recognize the value without us having to sell it? We really believe in the long-term value, so we want to hold on to it. And the answer resoundingly across the board was no. So really, that was the impetus for for the idea to really kind of start Salt. And so, having heard that story, I could really identify with that, from an early stage process of a financial technology platform, and just being able to recognize that value. So I like that story, and it resonated with me. So I was really interested in joining, and after that, for sure.
Right, and like you said, right? I mean, it really kind of is the ultimate long view, right? Being able to hold. So maybe you can talk just briefly about how how Salt kind of enables that and how the platform does that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, from a long view, when you hear long view, you think, there's one term that I think I think we both are trying to avoid saying, but you're hodling, right? That's the
No,
long
that,
view.
yeah. Well, only
That's the
because I
ultimate.
mispronounce it every time.
Absolutely, it's spelled wrong. I can't say it right. Yeah, it's not really the long view in the trading sense as it is an ideology that you want to participate in. So really, the long view for Salt and the long view at the company has been, someone is looking to hold an asset, and someone's looking to unlock value of that asset to be able to go and do something else with a depreciating asset, or an asset that they want to spend. So on one side of the equation, they want to hold something. On the other side, they want to spend something. And really, that, since the beginning of Salt, a predominant amount of our loan book is backed by Bitcoin. Currently, we're sitting at about over 85% of our loan book is backed by Bitcoin. And that includes all the other collateral types that we have on the platform. So we offer a lot of different options, but for the most part, Bitcoin is the most popular by far. And that's, I think, really evident in people taking the long view on Bitcoin. And, I think, just as we're mentioning, how Salt works, really, we don't really a big part of what we do is not checking credit scores. So it's an asset that you already own that you're borrowing against, so that you can unlock some value less than to be able to go do something else that you have, instead of just having, taking your gold and burying it in your backyard kind of thing. So, and I think the biggest key point about salt, and really when I started earlier on, I didn't have the firmest understanding of this, but has really kind of come to fruition in my mind over time from listening to and learning from different people in the community, is ultimately this is your asset. This is not our asset. Salt doesn't own this, it's yours, and we're just keeping it safe while you borrow against it. So, in the time, it's all in the time when we've had, in the time that we've been in business, we have never lost customer funds, right? It's been something that has been very important and very critical to our business. And so, I know, Dirk, one of the things that you have been really responsible for and built a lot of a technology and process around is protecting customer assets. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that and how that works on our platform.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, this, custody is kind of a controversial subject in the ethos of crypto, and in some cases, even kind of a four-letter word. But in when folks have the perspective of, if you don't own the keys, you don't own the crypto, which is absolutely true. It can be a challenge, and you really have to to be careful with custody, I think. And so the our approach, even just a couple of years ago, there wasn't the name brands and kind of the track record for some of the custodians that there is now. And so, we started off trying to build our own, and of course we've iterated through a number of different implementations around that, from the very early days, just using some cold/warm wallets to store the data, to store the keys. But eventually, that just wasn't going to work in the long term. So what we did is get the smartest people in crypto we could find, which is not me, and architected our own custody solution. That anybody who's been involved in building custody solutions or working around custody solutions, nothing in it would be shocking, and they would recognize all the terms. But we built a process that worked for us, and it was independently evaluated by our insurance company as part of our SOC 2, by our CCSS certification. And it's, kind of your typical air-gapped multi-sig cold storage, what you'd expect, but in a way that works for us operationally, right? So our focus really was on balancing strength with a medium level of transactions, right? We don't do things like, at the rate of an exchange, but we're also not just holding the funds forever, like, say, a big institution. So we built something that really just works for us.
Yeah, I that was one of the things that, before I started working at Salt, I didn't really understand what that meant, and the different aspects of that, and how that process worked, and what it meant to actually have custody yourself versus turning that over to someone else versus sharing that responsibility. So, you really touched on some things that have built Salt up to this date, but maybe I think it would be really cool for you to talk about the risks associated with custody, and as the industry grows, like, what are we doing to iterate on that? How are we growing that process itself?
Yeah. So obviously, the market is not what it was even just a couple of years ago, right? There has been a lot of maturity in the marketplace. There have been several custody providers who have kind of made their way to the top of the heap. So what we're trying to do now really is move more towards a custodian agnosticism, and say that 3 times fast. But what we want to do ultimately, right, is plug into multiple custodians, right? So we want the lending platform to be able to connect to multiple custodians in order to distribute the risk, which in turn will help us reduce cost and interest rates, and really just improve the distribution of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when we first started talking about that was how we can, from a customer experience standpoint, that being primarily my job, and then your job looking at the technology side of things, really marrying those two things together has been a really cool thing to see kind of shape up. So from our customer experience standpoint, I wanted to make sure, our customers, do they care about this? Is it something that they're going to have questions about? Are we going to still be able to maintain the same level of service and experience that people have come to expect? And really the answer is yes, like resoundingly yes. In fact,
Right.
what it actually does is, like you said, lower interest rates, which is something that people love to see, reduce costs, and better insurance, distributed risk. But what it also opens up is additional capital provider partnerships. Options where we can work with different custodians based on the capital provider. In addition to the technology, right? Like we're primarily a lender with custody as a part of our business. A lot of the technology providers that we could work with are primarily custodians, and they're innovating in that space. So it's very nice for us to be able to kind of swim in our lane and innovate in the space that we have learned about it and know well,
Right.
and let them innovate in their side and be able to marry those two things together. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely right. And yeah, and obviously people care about it, right? Because they want to know that they're going to get their funds back, and the lenders want to know that that they're going to get their money back. And so how we do that is, yeah, absolutely critical. And so I think to that point, right, one of the other things that we're working on very much is educating our customers. So how do we, you know, we have a lot of new folks move onto the platform that are just exploring crypto and wanting to get into it, but not wanting to lock up their funds. And so we do a lot of education of our customers on how to manage that risk themselves as part of what we're doing as well. But actually, I kind of feel like education has always been a big part of what we believe in, and what we do at Salt, right? I mean, it was part of what intrigued me about it early on, both inside the company and with our customers, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and you jogged a memory for me that I had forgotten, long since forgotten. But between the period of interviewing and working and accepting to work at Salt, and actually starting, there was a book club that had been started internally, and so I came to a couple of book club meetups and quickly realized that I had a lot to learn, a lot more to learn than I even thought I had to learn. I've always said that I have a lot to learn, but we had an internal book club
You still have a
that
lot to
had,
learn.
I still have, I always still have a lot to learn. Always. It's humbling to be reminded of that. And that there's no better example than our Bitcoin book club. My first lesson was about elliptic curve math and how all of that worked. And it was just a great introduction to really, make sure that I understood my place in the organization when I was starting out. So,
Right.
I think from that side of things to, another early discussion I remember having with internally and with customers was, on our platform, if you have $100,000 in Bitcoin and you deposit that, you can, let's say you borrow $50,000. Well, there's two ways that you can digest that information as a customer, and we can, as a company, display that to you. So it could either be you have $50,000 and you have a 50% loan to value, or you're 200% over collateralized. And we did a lot of early testing to see which one made the most sense. And so education is foundational to what we're building, not just in the sense that we want to spread the adoption of crypto and we want to grow that community, but we also want to provide financial education and for people to understand risk management and how all of that works. So, I mean, especially for our platform and for what we do, contextual notifications based on what users need to do to manage their loan, understanding the volatility of borrowing against Bitcoin. There's a lot of nuance to that, and I think we've done a good job in trying to provide that information. And we're, again, one of the reasons why I think we both joined this company is so that we could iterate on a product, and so we're always open to feedback. So if you ever have any, customers ever have any issues or things they would think that they could see as improvements, we always are open to feedback. In addition to that, we've worked on a lot of crypto-centric regulations and entities. So things around Bitcoin education, from the Colorado Blockchain Council to rules and regulations in Bermuda and Mauritius, TED Talks. It's really embedded, in what we do, and it's really embedded in the larger crypto community. But I think enough about that. I think people would like to know more about, for you, Dirk, you're involved with the Certified Bitcoin Professional Exam, and I think it would be cool for people to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no. So, like I said, I came out of the information security and privacy regulation and compliance. So, I did a lot of speaking about payment card industry stuff and that sort of thing, and it seemed kind of a natural fit for me to look for that sort of thing when I got into crypto. And fortunately, I managed to meet the guys at C4, the Cryptocurrency Certification Consortium, and get involved in participating in the Certified Bitcoin Professional and the CCSS, and really, work with that and get out there and help just continue that education. And a quarter of our company are CBPs, right? Anyone that works with crypto. So that's been a real opportunity for me as well. So basically, I think we're lucky that we both get the opportunity to work at a company that allows us to nerd out on this stuff.
Yeah, it's a big, I mean, it's a big part of, the evangelizing the technology, evangelizing the finance side of things. I think for us, for me personally, one of the things I've really enjoyed is, like you said, the certified Bitcoin professional exam is now recognized on LinkedIn. So that's awesome. It's an external validation for the community of something that, is independently, you're able to, prove your knowledge in a way that other people can verify it. In addition to that, I really enjoy getting pictures from friends, in rural places for Bitcoin ATMs. People that I've previously, badgered about Bitcoin that are now saying, "Oh, look, Bitcoin's in rural Florida. It's in rural North Carolina."
Right.
So that's great. I think, it's been really insightful to be part of this global, to see all this kind of transpiring with the Halving event and this global situation. I think it's really easy to see how, how Bitcoin fits into this narrative heading into the Halving. And really looking to the future. Governments are pumping money into the system, and we've got options for storing value and paying people. And hyperinflation is not an option for Bitcoin. So I'm excited for this happening, but I'm equally excited for, that there's so many more happenings to come. Right? Like, I think that's a testament to the system. So
Yeah.
yeah, Dirk, I think again, we both want to thank Bitcoin Magazine for this opportunity. Looks like we're pretty close to the end of our time. So I would like to say, for the best way for people to see how all this works, to experience all, is to, sign up for an account, and kind of, do your own diligence, do your own checks. And for people watching this live stream, we have a special discount code that should be here or there or somewhere on the screen, that will give you 2% off your interest rate up to $50,000 loan. And the code is half BTC20. So hopefully that's somewhere on the screen, so you can, if you're not able to understand my pronunciation there, or how to spell that specifically. And again, we're pumped that we're so close to the happening. But in the meantime, I want to thank all the miners for supporting the network, and would love to continue chatting with anybody on Twitter for the time being. And thanks again to Bitcoin Magazine for the opportunity.
Thank you.